Good morning, everyone. We're going to be starting off today's show with a special announcement. We are going to be rolling out a premium subscription for The Huddle. Basically, each Friday after the show, we will be continuing this conversation with you guys. If you sign up in a private Zoom channel, you'll be able to ask us anything on politics. And at least once a month, you're going to get all three of us together. Otherwise, you'll get one of us at a time. So you get to know us a little better. We'll get to know you guys a little better. So this will be fun. Guys, you guys looking forward to this?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, they don't want to necessarily be in a full-on public setting. And so this is, this gives people who have a question, but maybe doesn't want everyone in their family or their work employer or everyone to see them, a chance to chat with us and maybe ask a question without it getting broadcast to the world.
Yeah, it'll be great. Really excited. We heard your feedback, and I think we're going to have some more offerings and features as part of this that we're going to be rolling out soon.
Just so you guys know in the audience, when this first was proposed yesterday, they were like, Rachel is going to be $100 a show. Dan is 97, and Sean, you're
97 cents. You said,
yeah. Sean's like the freebie, and I was like, guys, that's not really fair. We need some house. I was like, I took the Zoran Mondami housing. I'm like, it's got to be a collectivism.
There you go.
There you go, the collectivism. And you guys should sign up right now. If you go to our Substack, go to the dchuddle.com. It's going to be $10 a month or $100 a year. And we look forward to getting to know you guys more intimately.
Well, and just to be clear, it's free. Just if you want the newsletter, the daybook that Dan,
that'll remain free. Right.
Yeah, everything remains free. This is just for those who want that extra special something.
The super fans are super fans. We love it. Okay, so today's 5. We're going to talk about this horrible tragedy in Minnesota. We'll go both into the facts on the ground, the politics of that, and also some of the media coverage that we have seen. We'll talk the foreign policy playing field, President Trump's foreign policy flex, which continues. We'll discuss an affordability push we're seeing from the White House as they try to reclaim the narrative on domestic policy. And Shapiro and Newsom basically lining up to start going after each other, the different strategies they're going to be taking, and then a fun little segment about who young men like. I'm calling it the man crush in terms of politics. But first, let's look at the day book. It's going to be a busy day at 10 a.m. Jeffries and Schumer, the Democratic leaders on the Hill, will hold their press conference. I expect a lot of talk about what happened in Minnesota. 10:15, the president's going to be participating in a photo opportunity with U.S. attorneys. Let's see. Also at 10,
probably also going to talk about Minnesota there.
Yeah, definitely. No doubt about it. Also around this time, we're going to be seeing that war powers resolution come up on the Senate floor. Over and under, Sean, how many Republicans vote for this with Democrats?
2.
It's interesting because the leadership right now is apparently watching as many as 6.
Yeah.
Josh Hawley, Tom Tillis, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Todd Young have not said how they're going to vote on this, and it sounds like right now they're trying to keep those defections down. But we'll see.
I'm going to say over 2.
Over 2. Okay.
Rachel?
12:45. Treasury Secretary.
What's the number?
Oh, my number?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was hoping to avoid the question.
I know you were.
I think it'll be. I'm going to say 3, maybe 3. So, and I think maybe.
Well, then the question is, does Fetterman vote Republican or Democrat?
Well, I think the expectation is he's going to vote with the Republicans on this. I would be shocked if he voted with the Dems, at least at this point. Now, if there are boots on the ground at some point, like in terms of a long-term commitment and military presence there, I think this changes things completely. But we're not there yet. So, 12:45, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is going to be doing the keynote at Minnesota Economic Club meeting. I'll be watching him and talking about some of these affordability proposals they're rolling out right now, I'm sure. 4:30, the House is going to be voting on the ACA subsidies discharge petition. This is going to pass. Yesterday, we saw 9 House Republicans buck their own leadership and vote with Democrats.
Over under 9. Do some, if they see this, do some get on board just to say they voted at home, they did something?
I mean, now it's a free vote because it's going to pass anyway.
No, it's
why
not
not?
a free vote.
You disagree, Sean?
Yeah, I don't know that that's a free vote. I will say I think
over under.
You're still paying. Oh, I think it's not. I'll say the over under should be 10. I think it's under 10.
You think it's under? We should also say
over, not by a lot, but over.
I think it's going to be 9. I think it's going to be the same thing. But
the magnificent 9.
We should also note here that this is a big victory, Dan, for Hakeem Jeffries. I mean, he's been pushing for this for a really long time, and he just got it, right?
He played his cards right. He did not cave and he did not start negotiating, and the game kind of came to him. I give him credit.
Couple other small things we should note about today. Amidst all the talk about Greenland, apparently Denmark's ambassador is going to be holding bipartisan meetings with lawmakers tomorrow. And then it sounds like, Sean, you're hearing a lot of people are already talking about tomorrow's Supreme Court decisions and what we might expect. What are folks saying?
Well, I mean, the birthright is an obvious one, the Voting Rights Act. And so there's a lot of, as you guys know, the Supreme Court doesn't project all this, but I talked to a lot of people yesterday that are definitely keeping their eye on this. The tariff case in particular, can President Trump use, was that justified under Article 2? Or is that inherently an Article 1 issue? But like, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of things. I mean, just those three alone, like you've got Voting Rights Act in particular and the tariffs case. And those are going to be, I think, the two big ones that people look for.
If they do Voting Rights Act right now, forget if they just strike it down right now, Republicans will keep the House. I mean, like,
oh, no. That's when Johnson just starts to go in and be like, this is what I wanted. Trump wants a ballroom. This is what I want. And he starts, putting up new drapes.
Before we jump into the agenda, we're going to do a word from our sponsors. Sean?
Yeah, look, I wanted to make sure everyone, yesterday I was wearing the Cozy Earth joggers. Today I got the t-shirt on. I will admit this. I still have the pajama pants on. I don't want to show them to you. But I love my Cozy Earth. I told you it was a big hit over the holidays, and it's like head to toe, man. I would do this if it wouldn't be embarrassing, but I'd show you the eye mask. It is revolutionary.
I will just say from our end, one of our kids has the sheets on his bed. And when I asked if he, we got him and said, hey, try him out. He does not want the Amazon sheets put back on. He is a Cozy Earth fan now. So our house is, the dominoes are falling as people get addicted to Cozy Earth.
Yeah, Rachel, once you get in, you're not going back. And like I said,
Cozy Earth, you don't go back.
Once you go Cozy Earth, you don't go back. And I'm telling you, like I said, I can literally say head to toe, joggers, pajamas, the luxury towels. And like for people who don't fully appreciate this, literally, I used our own code to buy this stuff because it's that good. And so whether you like the pajamas, the towels, which are unbelievably like soft and luxurious, the eye mask, once you get one Cozy Earth thing, and Dan, I mean, I have a feeling.
I'm not an eye mask
I'm just cracking up thinking about Sean wearing an eye mask to bed. Wow.
It's all Maha, man. It's about the light and the circadian rhythm and things like that. But look, don't take my word for it. Just go to CozyEarth.com, use code HUDDLE for 20% off anything on the site. It's a new year. Get yourself fitted for the new year properly with amazingly comfortable stuff. Go to CozyEarth.com. Use code word HUDDLE, 20% off the site. Rachel, once you get into this, you're going to be full Cozy Earth.
I look forward to it. Let's start jumping into business here. And we're going to be shifting tone quite dramatically right now, starting with the tragedy in Minnesota. In a few seconds, I am going to play the video of the shooting, and it's graphic and it has profane language. So if you have children at home, now would be the time to sort of move them away from this. So yesterday, for those of you who are not aware, a U.S. citizen, a 37-year-old mother of 6, was killed by ICE officials after she appeared to drive at one of the officers after a bunch of them were telling her to get out of her car. This has very quickly become a political hot potato, and we'll just start right now with the video, and then we're going to talk first about the facts on the ground. Let's play it.
No! No! Shame! Shame! Oh my fucking God! What the fuck? What the fuck? You just fucking, what the fuck did you do?
In a sign of just how divided our nation is right now, people are watching this same video and seeing very, very different things. Depending on your politics, Democrats, some of them are calling murder right now and blaming the Trump administration. Republicans are saying this was an act of domestic terrorism. And we're going to talk about the politics in a second, but let's just start with the facts on the ground. Dan, I want to start with you. Based on what you see here, do you feel like the use of deadly force was unfortunately justified?
Yeah, I mean, look, I am incredibly sympathetic to law enforcement, whether it's police in New York City or ICE officials. You have to make a snap decision. Like when I watch that video, I don't know what her intent is. I mean, I hear the officer saying, get out of the car, get out of the car. She puts it in reverse and appears to kind of peel out, right? So to me, you are resisting, you are disobeying law enforcement, and you are kind of resisting what they're asking. If I'm that officer that the car is coming at, I don't know if she's going to swerve, if she's going to. So do I think it's just like, yeah, self-defense is self-defense in a snap instant decision. And I am not going to say that that was, unjustified. I'm not going to necessarily say it was justified, but who the heck am I to sit here in a chair and second guess what is a life and death snap decision for the officer himself, other officers, and the public? I was raised, if an officer tells you to do something, you do it. Yeah. You do not sit there and say no and try to run away or drive away. So, but just that is heartbreaking to watch on many levels.
Sean, before I come to you, just a couple of things. I mean, you see the video there, but officials are saying that this woman had been following ICE officials around and sort of harassing them throughout the day, that there's a story before the video actually begins. It's also important to keep in mind that apparently this officer who made the shot, he had been dragged by anti-ICE protesters before who had tried to ram him with his car. You have to think about the mentality of the officer too. Just sort of weigh in on your take on this in terms of
and not just, but like very seriously injured in a previous incident. So like you have somebody who's thinking to himself, I know how this thing turns out. I'll start with what Dan said. First of all, the loss of life is tragic, right? This is not some hardened criminal that was out there with a gun pointing it. Like, I don't think this is how she thought that day would go. Yeah. And so I feel bad for her and her family, because this was not how this goes. That being said, to Dan's point, a couple things. One, she put herself in this situation. She was, by every account, again, facts on the ground, impeding a law enforcement operation. She had been trolling them all day. She put that vehicle in the middle of an investigative area for a reason, right? She wasn't some random bystander on the street that got caught up in something. She was actively trying to impede a legal, lawful law enforcement action. The officer stood in front. Again, with Dan's point, regardless of even his previous experiences, bottom line is she was told to stop, to exit the vehicle, and she accelerated at the officer. That being said, I will tell you, and I think where this is going to come down legally is there's always an issue with in law enforcement, force must be met with force. So if someone's wielding a knife, you can't shoot them with a gun. I mean, there's a very and I'm not the right person. I say this not because I'm defending them, just because I think when this comes down to the legal aspects of did they act legally. The other thing is, you had one officer she had her window down. The officer is there at the side of her thing. The other officer puts himself in front of the vehicle. I don't know if that's proper procedure or not. I just don't. And so there's going to be, I think, a real look when we talk about the reaction. Was procedure followed? What did she do, as to your point, leading up to this thing? But I think, once she accelerated what she did and she's coming, I mean, when you see that from the other angle, and there is another news organization, I think it's an NBC affiliate in Minneapolis, that shows it from the officer standpoint, from him coming from his back at her. And there's no question she's accelerating, taking him out. So he has an obligation at that point to act defensively to protect his own life. And I think at the end of the day, on that standpoint, this is going to get ruled a justified shooting.
So the knee-jerk reaction to this has been, frankly, gross. I want to play this video of the mayor of Minneapolis and what he said after this.
And I have a message for ICE. To ICE, get the fuck out of Minneapolis. We do not want you here. Your stated reason for being in this city is to create some kind of safety, and you are doing exactly the opposite. People are being hurt. Families are being ripped apart. Long-term Minneapolis residents that have contributed so greatly to our city, to our culture, to our economy are being terrorized, and now somebody is dead. That's on you.
Dan, I just feel like this sort of rhetoric is one of the reasons we found ourselves in this position yesterday. I mean, you have certain leaders who want to alienate ICE or make them out to be these horrible people who are out to get Americans. that leads to protests. And not only that, but escalations of those protests, people tracking ICE officials, things very quickly escalate. Like, am I wrong about this? Or like, are you as equally outraged by that reaction by the mayor?
No, I think you're right. And I think both sides yesterday went quickly to their tribal corners. I think Kristi Noem's initial, like this was a domestic terrorist, and kind of painting the deceased as this like out of control, person was not the right thing to say at the moment. Even Tom Homan's initial reaction was, hey, I don't know enough yet. Like, we need to learn, we need to gather the facts. So unfortunately, like the knee jerk then, like to me, the mayor, I mean, it's totally inappropriate. Like, first off, using language like that. Secondly, ICE is doing their job, right? You can say, Donald Trump, we need to win the House back and change ICE policy, but ICE is doing their job. They have a right to go and try to find people who are here illegally. It's aggressive. It's not my, politics. But you are right. Like, to me, it was like sickening and sad to watch both sides just jump so hard at painting the other as this total extreme, when I think, as we just talked about it with the facts, it's somewhere in the middle, and it's tragic.
Sean, I want to come to you on the domestic terrorism very quickly. But Dan, is there any Democrat that you feel like has had a good reaction to this? I mean, there, like the reactions, there was tons of them. I mean, Hakeem Jeffries put out you were sending it around in our chat last night, put out an Instagram sort of video saying this guy's got to be criminally charged, like AOC calling this murder. Was there anyone that you felt, any Democratic leader that you felt did take the right tone here?
Honestly, those who didn't say something right away, I think, I mean, look, I get why Jeffries and others are doing what they're doing. I get why Noem did what she did. No one, in my opinion, was kind of calm and rational about this, because I think everyone's afraid of their base.
Sean, I know you're going to sound off on the left here, but before you do, what do you make of some folks in the administration calling this domestic terrorism?
So I think the word that comes to mind for me about this whole situation is unfortunate, right?
Yeah.
She shouldn't have been there. She shouldn't. She had been clearly, like, again, as you pointed out, every account, facts on the ground, no dispute. She had been trolling them and following them and sort of trying to disrupt their operations all day. The point that I made earlier is the following. She should not have been there. She should not have done that, but it should not have escalated to the point that it did, right? And again, this is why, to me, I'll say this: domestic terrorism is a phrase that you use for somebody who is clearly she was trying to disrupt. She was trying to get in the middle of an operation. That's very different from somebody bringing a weapon to inflict pain on somebody. Yes, what it turned into was potentially harming a law enforcement operator carrying out their legal duties that they were ordered to do. There was no reason she should have accelerated, but that's very different from somebody that was trying to like plow into people using that vehicle intentionally. I don't believe she went there with the intent to hurt anyone. She wanted to be a disruptor, an agitator, right? That's a very different person in my book that did something that intended to cause pain or suffering or death in a crowd of innocent civilians. That's just it. There's a big line. So to Dan's point, I will say this is, as I said, unfortunate. They should have probably addressed her earlier in the day. There's no sign that she had weapons with her or that she was trying to. She freaked out. That's what I think. I mean, someone stands in front of your car, they think you suddenly go, oh my God, I'm going to be arrested. I mean, I'll just say this hypothetically. When you're a kid, you might do something wrong and you suddenly see cops and you start to run instinctively because you maybe were drinking in the woods. That's just a hypothetical. And so like you flee, and who knows, maybe, but I'm saying we'll never know. But the bottom line is this is not somebody who I think came to inflict harm on individuals. She came to disrupt an operation. And I wish that it had been dealt with sooner so we wouldn't be having this conversation. But full stop, last point I'll make, for Jacob Frey to use words like that, and I get he's pandering to the base in Minneapolis, but they were not there doing something nefarious. They were there carrying out a legally ordered operation to enforce the laws of the United States. If you don't like them, change them, but you can't blame ICE for doing their job.
Dan, there's some reporting in Axios from last night that some Democrats are thinking about engaging in a shutdown fight over this incident. I know. I mean, look. I mean, you look at the polling.
Just to defund the police. Here, go for it. Right. I mean,
like clearly they're trying to sort of latch onto this notion that, you know, what the president is doing with ICE is not popular with a lot of Americans. I haven't seen the most recent polling on that, but like this could backfire. Could this backfire on the Democratic Party, and will Democratic leaders allow them to engage in a shutdown fight over this?
Well, this is the, you know, just the tail wag the dog thing, because Sean, you and I talked this summer about the fact that there is a defund the ICE movement brewing again. This happened in 2020 in the party. And I think, you know, this goes to the fact that for Democrats to get power back, the country has to know that we're not going to reopen the southern border and just, you know, kind of allow people in again, which is essentially what the Biden administration did. And so I think for the party and for the leaders, the challenge is, how do you give assurance that we will keep it closed and you will be safe, but go to this bigger question of, once you get past the bad hombres, what do you do with all these, you know, 16 million people here? Because I think the country is more on our side. So my hope is that Schumer and Jeffries and Shapiro and Newsom, and we're going to talk about this, can put a lid on that. Because I go to, if you're Roy Cooper in North Carolina and Sherrod Brown in Ohio, you do not want to be talking about defunding ICE. No,
we got
and also look, you got to remember also part of the reason they were there was massive fraud in Minnesota, in Minneapolis in particular. And so there's, if Jacob Fry wants to come out on his high horse, he's also got a lot of other stuff to address.
Well, and that's where I think this is the challenge, right, Sean? Because I think, you know, you may not agree with this, but the administration kind of goes to 11 often, right? Meaning there's like a shock and awe, overwhelming amount of force to address a Somali fraud problem, right? With ICE. I mean, and I get it. If you're illegal, you're illegal. But like, they go big and they go bold, right? And it's always been Trump's style. And I think he likes the optics, because if you get in his way, it's like, you know, my gun's bigger than yours. Sorry, that's a bad analogy right now. But that amps up the Democratic Party.
Let's move on, Sean. I know you had a lot of thoughts about how the media has covered this.
Yeah.
Maybe we can, you want to do that real quick? And
I just want to, I mean, I think, again, look, we laid out, I think Dan and I laid out what I think we can all agree to in terms of what the situation was on the ground. And again, whether or not it was a justified shooting or not will be determined. But I think there's no question, A, she was there illegally. B, she did accelerate trying to hit an officer. And yet I was reading through all of the various different media organizations. This was AP. This is their headline, the Associated Press, the people that everybody gets their news from in terms of news organizations. Woman killed by ICE agent in Minneapolis was mother of 3, poet, and new to the city. Playbook this morning. The latest from Minnesota. Hundreds of people joined vigils in protest last night following the killing of 37-year-old Renee Good by an ICE agent. The tragic details of the deceased, a mother of 3 and a devout Christian. The Today Show, Craig Melvin, outrage after ICE shot and killed a woman. Let me ask you this. If you only didn't get to see the context that we provided this morning, what would you think after reading those headlines? That ICE went out, in my opinion, I'd be like, wow, ICE went out last night and shot a woman because she was a devout Christian and poet. This is the BS that the American people are so fed up with the media narratives, because that's not, you know, a fair read of what happened last night, no matter whether you're on the far right, the far left, or in between. This is the problem with today's media.
Look, I'm just going to say, I don't disagree with you there. I don't think that there's anything wrong with humanizing this woman. I mean, who she was in terms of a mother, a Christian, but the thing that, like, I was watching CNN, I can't remember, it was the 7 p.m. hour or 8 p.m. hour. And there was a lot of talk about, you know, there was not a lot of talk about what happened before the video started. And like, that's one of the most important facts, is context, right?
Yes.
Was this woman had been hanging around for a long time.
At the end of the day, if you played this out for a second, I could see, I mean, Dan laid out a strong case for, hey, this is why the left says what they do. I'm very clear that, like, again, you impede a law enforcement officer, but to say that, like, the way those headlines read from those legacy outlets, it's all about like she was some innocent civilian that got hit on the side of the street. That's not what happened. There was unequivocally, by the best reading of the situation, somebody impeding a law enforcement operation, and it escalated way too far. But that's but to claim that somehow ICE just went out and targeted someone, which is the impression that they're giving, is so over the top ridiculous.
I'm sure we're going to be talking a lot about this this week. We'll return to it at some point, but let's move on for now to our next topic: foreign policy playing fields. Yesterday, the administration told Congress that there's no boots on the ground in Venezuela, not going to be boots on the ground in Greenland. But the president told the New York Times that oversight of Venezuela could last for could last for years. By the way, Sean, you're going to love this 2-hour interview with the New York Times and the president. I'm very jealous.
And among, I mean, again, it was who was in that room. You got Katie Rogers, who is literally has full on Trump derangement syndrome. I will say
there was 4 of them.
There was like 4 or 5.
I was going to say there were 4. Tyler Pager at least wrote some great stuff.
I got to get myself one.
There's a couple of good, but also there was a call with Colombia's president that took about an hour in between. So I'm still out.
And the reporter stayed in the room. He let them stay in the room for this call with the leader of Colombia. Amazing. Gosh, the access is amazing. What other president has done anything like this? It's incredible. But I digress. So we learned yesterday that the U.S. the Trump administration is planning to effectively assume control of selling Venezuela's oil indefinitely. They announced, the president announced on Truth Social, I believe it was, a 50% increase in defense spending. I should clarify that this is a request, TBD if it actually goes through. Sean, I get that the defense hawks are kind of in heaven right now, but first of all, Republicans ran on cutting the government, not increasing spending by 50% in the defense industry. And second of all, there's a lot of libertarian Republicans who voted for the president hoping he would have the exact sort of opposite tact than he's taking right now. What is the play here? And like, are we seeing the president try to totally change the world order? Like, what is the strategy?
Yeah, 2 quick points before I address that. One, someone asked in the chat, I put the other video link in the chat. So if you're looking for the one where I tell you about the other angle that you can see it in, it's on my social media on Twitter, and I put it in the chat. Secondly, to your point, Rachel, there was a stat that came out over the weekend. Transcripts showed Trump spoke for over 13,400 minutes in 2025, talked to the press, 74% of events that he held. I love that stat because I think it's such a contrast to the last president. And you were talking about the access that people gives. 74% of events that Trump did, he talked to the press. And I think that, like, for as much as they get pissy about how he does it, you can't claim that he's not transparent and doesn't provide a ton of access.
It's a love-hate relationship with the media.
To your point, I mean, look, I am a big believer that if you want peace, then prepare for war. And so I'm a big believer in, but that's a large amount of money to go from one, to ask for a $600 billion increase is a big chunk of change. And what I was a little concerned about in the number was the justification. And I think my pet peeve always in Washington, whether it's a natural disaster or some, crisis, is you throw a number out and then justify it later, right? So it's like, we're going to spend $1 billion combating X. And you're like, okay, what are you going to do with that money? And we've seen in Minnesota, you throw a ton of money at COVID or anything else, childcare, and people just steal the money, and there's a massive rampant amount of fraud. So I would rather see the administration come lay out a case that we need. We're going to give a raise to military service members. We're going to add number of, end strength on the Army or the Navy because we want X. We need these weapon systems or these space systems to combat future threats. But I think it's I think the answer to your question is, when you're talking about all of these measures, whether it's going on offense, it's combating China in the 7th Fleet, it's Russia's capabilities, it's the president is trying to show, hey, look, we got to ramp this stuff up. I do think it's a lot. And I also believe, and this goes back to the foreign policy point about everybody weeking out, boots on the ground. It's a tactic. I get so amazed how many people Trump's going to throw out $600 million. He's a negotiator, a deal maker. So he'll probably say, great, you give me $250. That's even more than I
Sean,
would.
Sean, let me ask you though, does Trump run the risk that it's really apparent he doesn't want to use ground troops, right? Not in Iran, not in Gaza, not in Venezuela, not in Greenland. I get your point, right? Which is, hey, keep it on the table because people will say, what if? But I do wonder if the rest of the world starts to say, no, he's never putting boots on the ground. And therefore, we got to worry about drones. We got to worry about the Navy. But ultimately, you know, what happens? I do wonder if like some people start getting concerned about this because they were pretty blatant yesterday. No. There will be no boots on the ground.
And I think it's a good question, Dan, because I think that for a lot of people on the surface, it's like, oh, well, if we're not going to have 10,000 troops come aboard our shores. But I will tell you, you can't minimize drones, strikes, you know, Tomahawk strikes, cyber strikes, other non-kinetic. I mean, like that's like saying, like, you know, you promised that you weren't going to come at me with a gun, but you've got a knife. You're jacked like a trained MMA fighter. That still means you're going to get your ass kicked. It's just a question of what tool is going to kick it.
Well, and Venezuela, but maybe not Taiwan. I mean, that's
no, that's also different. You're not. Yeah. That's not going to be that is going to be a Navy fight, and it will be a lot of weaponry if that ever, God forbid, went that direction. I don't think you're going. I mean, China will do a ground invasion on Taiwan, but I don't know that we would put troops on. I mean, again, same point. The bottom line is. I think if you're another country leader, you get it. You don't have to be invaded by a foreign force to feel like you're under attack. You just saw Maduro get jacked in real quick by Delta Force. And I think the people that know, and they know that there's a lot of things that the U.S. military, CIA, et cetera, can do to them, their country, without putting boots on the ground.
I would also just add to that point, Dan, on your question about is him taking boots off the ground, off the table, like, you know, does it weaken his hand in some way? Like, this is Trump we're talking about. He's the most unpredictable president, like, you know, in our lifetime. Like, I spent yesterday literally calling Trump associates being like, do you think he would invade Greenland? Like, you know, like, so a lot of world leaders are looking at this. They can't predict him. So, like,
that's the key, Rachel. That's the key.
It is the key. It's part of the power.
If you do what, I mean, Trump always says this, I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm not going to take things off the table. That's the problem. The second that you have a guy like Biden that says, I won't do the following. Okay, great. You just told me exactly what you won't do. You've limited your positions. Yeah. What Trump does is he keeps you guessing. And that's the unpredictability. Yeah. Of who he is. The only challenge, and I know we're going to move on with that, and we mentioned this a little bit yesterday, is I do wonder, it's one thing to have shock and awe when you're talking about like DEI and universities and law firms. I do wonder if the American people get a little like, oh my God, you know, we're talking other countries, we're talking war, we're talking the military. Like, you can be crazy like Fox, but at some point people say enough. Like, I don't like this.
Dan, I want to ask you about Democrats' reaction to, like, you know, this flex that we're seeing by the president, because, you know, there's clearly a divide in the party. You have one side that is sort of this more old school mentality, if you could call it that, where, you know, you don't want to look anti-military. You don't want to be accused of being weak. You don't want to be accused of not supporting troops. But then you have another group of Democrats who, you know, the reflexive reaction is, oh my gosh, like, unconstitutional. This is awful. Anything Trump does, we're gonna, you know, go against him. I think I know which strategy you think is probably smarter, but like, who are you watching on this, and which approach do you think is working, and which one needs to just be totally thrown out the window?
Well, you know what I'm going to say? We need option C. And I think that's the challenge in the party, which is we're not going back to what Joe Biden tried to go back to, right? Joe Biden would, till today, if he came on the show, would brag about how he strengthened NATO and kind of the old world order he thinks he helped put back together. But whether it's Trump's election or Brexit, the world is changing, right? The Cold War is over. Now it's China. Now it's, you know, I think Trump does deserve credit for this idea of like, we need to clean up our own neighborhood. He does. Now, the question is, how do you do it? And is this, you know, is this the best tact in Greenland necessarily? But I think what we don't have is a 21st century worldview. And I think Gavin Newsom, you know, we said on Monday, he hadn't spoken as of our show on Monday. He kind of put out a somewhat vanilla statement later in the day that didn't necessarily criticize what Trump was doing, but kind of how and the risks of like, now we own Venezuela, which I think was appropriate. But I'm looking at people like, at some point, Josh Shapiro and Gavin. If you're serious about running for president, what is your world order? Because I don't think you're going to criticize everything Trump's doing. It's the how and a little bit of the crazy here. But we don't have a 21st century worldview.
And we'll come back to
I want to make one quick point before we move on to what Dan said. Look, this is what Chuck Schumer said about Maduro. The president brags about his Venezuela policy. This is months ago. Give us a break. He hasn't brought an end to the Maduro regime. The Maduro regime is more powerful today than it was entrenched when the president began. That's months ago. Elizabeth Warren, Maduro is a dictator and a crook. The United States should lead the international community in addressing Venezuela's humanitarian crisis and support regional efforts to negotiate a political transition. Dick Durbin, we can't allow this president's short-term attention span to stop us, he's talking about Trump, from delivering our promise to help the Venezuelan country build their people. Tim Kaine, this is a deeply concerning development for Venezuelans and the entire region since instability. That's what he had said before. Chris Van Hollen, obviously.
Well, you know what, Sean, but I'll just save you because I could pull up all the conservatives that criticize nation building, adventurism, and even Venezuela specifically.
Fine. But what I'm saying,
and if you see Tulsi Gabbard in the Witness Protection Program, let us know.
But here's the point that I was trying to draft off of what you said, which is everybody in Washington loves to put out statements about everything. We need to fight for a level playing field when it comes to our manufacturers and our services and trade. We need to get rid of Maduro and support all this. He does it, and then they instinctively go, I can't believe he did it. It's the same thing with healthcare. It's like at some point, and we're guilty of that on healthcare, so I'll cede you that. But everyone wants to talk about the deficit, the debt, waste in government. When Doge comes along, we don't like it. When they talk about, I hate Maduro, but when he has regime change, we don't like it. At the end of the day, Trump is actually doing what all of these politicians said they would do.
Let's move on to our next topic. So the White House, despite all the talk about foreign policy, they are trying to sort of reset the narrative here on domestic policy. Yesterday in the White House press briefing, Sean, you called it, the focus was not on Venezuela. It was actually on RFK and HHS's new food pyramid. By the way, eat more veggies and protein and less bread. Shocked that it took this long for them to make those changes, but I digress. And now the White House is talking about affordability. Well, they have been talking about it, but they're starting to roll some things out. Yesterday, the president embraced what Dan informs me is actually originally an Elizabeth Warren idea, announcing a plan to block large corporations and institutional investors from buying up single family homes. This is supposed to make them more available. So there's more availability. People can buy houses that can't right now. They're also looking at an executive order to allow people to dip into their retirement and college saving accounts to afford down payments on their homes. Sean, a lot of Republicans are applauding this. I think Josh Hawley is out there saying this is great policy. But my question on this is, like, is this enough? Like, these seem to be sort of around the edges. These proposals are sort of around the edges. You know, if you're advising the president, like, what other policies should he be pursuing on the affordability piece?
So I'll segue by saying this. Last night, Speaker Johnson announced that the State of the Union would be February 24th. And I say that because I always have a saying around the State of the Union, which is, are you a priority or a talking point? And what I mean by that is the following. So I'll get a call from someone who works at some random agency at HUD or something and says, like, oh my God, you wouldn't believe, did you hear that we got mentioned in the State of the Union? And I'll respond by saying, has anyone from White House Leg Affairs contacted you? And they're like, well, no. And I go, well, then guess what? You're a talking point. You were a great. And so I think I say all that because yesterday, what the president announced yesterday, obviously will take Congress to act on. So I think largely it was a talking point. It's what you want to do in the issue of affordability is do some policy stuff, which they're doing. But you also want to make sure that you're saying the right things, that you're messaging properly, acknowledging the issue, feeling their pain. As I've said before, when members of Congress send FEMA a letter after a disaster saying, we hope that you acknowledge the wildfire or the hurricane that happened in our district, it's not like FEMA didn't know that. The member of Congress is just making sure their constituents know that they're doing the things, going through the machinations and taking credit for the money. Two things about yesterday's policy. One, institutional investors account for, I think it's less than 1% of all of this housing buy-up. So
that's right. And that's according to AEI and a
right.
conservative.
So, but I do think where I would have concentrated more is I like what they're talking about in terms of being able to dip into a college saving or a 401k to use that money to purchase a new home. I think that if they could focus on, as I said before, the VA, and again, Dan's pointed this out, I agree. You've got to be careful how you do it, but creating some kind of loan program and opportunities through 401k and student loans or 529s, where you could use that money to purchase a home, I think is great. But I think that where I felt like they missed the boat is when they talk about institutional investors. I don't think that many young people look at that. It may be, but I don't think from a messaging standpoint, that's where a lot of people's head was like, oh my God, as soon as we stop institutional investors from buying,
we can afford a house. Yeah.
I actually, you know what? I'll take the other side of this a little bit. I think
defending the administration. Look at that.
Well, or defending Democrats because, you know,
they came up with the idea.
is the sincerest form of flattery here. And by the way, Gavin Newsom came out within hours and said, oh, California, we're going to do the same thing. Look, yes, if you read about the facts of this, do I think this is going to move the needle? No. Like in terms of if you truly banned institutional investors from doing this, and I'm not even sure how they could go about doing that, but let's say they did, I do not believe it will truly deal with the housing costs. But what it does say is, I am on your side. I hear you that housing is a problem. I hear you that people, you know, that Blackstone owns 50,000, you know, single family homes. And I know it's less than they did before and they're getting out of it. And, you know, I live in New York. I read all of Bloomberg yesterday, but I do think it is good politics, which is why Elizabeth Warren kind of proposed it originally. To me, the bigger issue is it's buried. Like, do you want nobody to hear this? Because you are shock and awing on all other fronts. And you're putting stuff out and maybe they're going to repackage it around the State of the Union. To me, it's like, if I'm a Democrat, it's like kind of a little bit of like, they are moving. Like they are not sitting and just saying big, beautiful bill or die. It is like, we're going to start flooding the zone on energy. We're going to start flooding the zone on housing. I'll be curious what Bessent says today. Yeah. You know, Democrats, what?
Look, and to Dan's point, this is the right move. If this is a lead up to State of the Union, in terms of affordability and options, then that's great. And that's what they should be doing is every day leading up to February 24th, talking about something that's making your life more affordable.
Yep.
And by the way, Rachel, I'll give you like yesterday, you're right. They weaved it into the Maha thing, flipping the food pyramid, like every single thing that they do, you know, full stop, including, as I've mentioned, I think they did a good job on Venezuela on this, should be tied into somehow, how does this come back to you in your life and making it more affordable?
But you got to get all this foreign stuff off the headline, Sean.
You can't. I mean, that's,
I don't know. But it's their choosing. It's all their choosing.
Fair. All right.
That kind of feels like that's what they're trying to do. Cause like if you don't roll this stuff out, yes, on the one hand, it can get buried. But on the other hand, if you don't put forward new news that people are going to talk about, like it's good. People will continue to talk about Venezuela and Greenland, but I get the point. I mean, it's tough both ways. Let's move on. So Josh Shapiro declaring today that he's running for re-election, right? And then Newsom has his State of the State. Dan, you called this a spring training day for 2028.
Very apt, by the way. Kudos. That's very apt.
Yeah, I wouldn't come up with that as the former ballerina. Dan, like just go into like the very different strategies these two guys are.
So if you're a 2028 junkie, like this is a great day. Like this is very exciting because you have two kind of primetime speeches, so to speak, from what are probably the two front runners in two different lanes. Shapiro, it's no shocker. He's going to kick, he's running for re-election, but you get your moment to make it official. He's raised $30 million. He is running on the get blank done mantra. He's going to try to, be the workhorse, say these are all the things I've done in Pennsylvania, a big swing state. I'm going to try to pick up House seats. Like I'm going to show you, not tell you what I can do for you. Newsom is the show horse right now, right? He is all about trolling Trump and social media and getting in your face and really being a contrast, kind of leading the resistance. And again, with the State of the State address, he's going to get his opportunity now to kind of try to put some meat on the bone and project. And so I think watching these two candidates, one is seen as a show horse, one is a workhorse. They are on a collision course here in 2027, barring something crazy. So if you like 2028 politics already, get your popcorn.
Sean, anything you want to add to that, or should we move to man crush?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is I think Dan laid this out great. The only distinction that I would have is that Newsom has the freedom of not having to run for re-election. Like Shapiro right now has to say, here's what I did for you, Pennsylvania. Yep. And there is a nuance in that because Pennsylvania voters don't care probably as much because he's got to appeal to a wider swath. He's got a great opponent in the state treasurer that's very different from when he ran against Mastriano. So the nuance is that Shapiro is probably tethered a little bit more to in terms of how far out he can go.
One thing, Sean, to flag though, that I'm going to be watching in the next year for Newsom, Katie Porter is the nominee or the front runner and potentially the governor. That could be a huge pain, a thorn in his side because she is left of Newsom. She could start shooting at what he says if he starts positioning, to your point, a little more towards, let's say, Iowa than Sacramento. And if she is shooting at him from the left, that's a challenge for him.
Yeah.
He'll also have to respond to everything she does, right? Like if she's like doing super far lefty policies and okay, let's do our last segment before we go to questions. Man crush. Let's put up element.
You're welcome for that headline, America.
Dan, that's Dan's headline. Man crush. Okay, so new polling showing that Obama is very well liked among young men. You have him followed by the YouTuber Mr. Beast and Joe Rogan. Let's see, Donald Trump is at what, 46%. So this poll comes out, there's a Puck headline or a Puck piece this morning saying that disaffected young men who helped elect Trump are fed up with high prices, worried about AI, and frustrated with the president's neocon turn, suggesting that his popularity with young men is declining. Sean, do you agree with that, first of all, or like think that this is just sort of a blip, not a real trend here?
I think a couple things. One, Trump and his social media team, like we talked about the New York Times story a minute ago. One of the things that I think the Trump campaign did phenomenally during the lead up to the election was their reach out to non-traditional political outlets. They sat down with the Nelk boys. They sat down with Joe Rogan. They sat down with Sean Ryan and all of these guys who, when you listen to Rogan, he talked about issues regarding, political and policy issues surrounding the election, but generally that's not his shtick, right? And so my point is that, like, for folks who tuned into that, they got a dose of it. Then Trump won the election and he didn't do as much of that anymore. And Joe Rogan and others didn't talk about politics anymore. So you got a little bit of a surge right before the election. So it doesn't worry me as much, like in terms of where the polling stands. What I would say is that if I were the White House comms team, I'd say, let's make sure, speaking of the food pyramid, that we take a little less New York Times, which I would call the ultra processed food of the food pyramid, and put a little more protein in there, which I would call Sean Ryan and Joe Rogan and, some of the Nelk boys and stuff like that. So I would look at your media diet the same way that you're looking at your food pyramid: less ultra processed, more protein.
The problem is the president, as you know, reads the New York Times, and as much as he bashes him, he's obsessed with them too. So, like, he wants to talk about that stuff. Dan,
I'm sure he likes ultra processed. Everyone but you gotta. The
guy loves McDonald's. I mean, come on. I mean,
it's protein.
For starters,
Dan, did anything surprise you in this? Sorry to talk over you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll do one snark piece, which is like for all the people on the right who like to troll an Obama third term. I mean, a Trump third term, we may have an Obama third term should that be allowed to happen. But in all seriousness, the two things that jumped out to me is, one, Vance is significantly under Trump. So, Sean, if you were advising the Vance team, I think you see this and it's like, we need to get those numbers up, right? We need to try to he's got work to do, let's say.
Well, the funny thing is, Dan, but to your point, you're absolutely right. Then if you're the Vance team, do what the Trump team did. Get out there and you have the freedom to do that.
Yeah. So I'll be curious to see how Vance handles as he hits the trail the next year and does more interviews and everything. Kind of how does he play this? The other thing is, and this is a political show, we are, kind of brass tacks here. If you're Kamala Harris, you're AOC, like other than Kristi Noem, women have struggled recently on the national level with men. And this does not show that there's any improvement there.
Can I ask one real question, Ed, because you name checked her? I just from a Democratic standpoint, forget a general election. If you're a Democrat in the primary, do you look at what just happened with Tim Walz and say we can't? This is her judgment's in question. I mean, I got to believe as a general election voter, not that I was ever going to support her, but like for every other reason, that is so disqualifying.
Yeah,
I think the challenge, if she runs, and again, I've said for a long time, I think she really does. The thing you have to ask yourself is Black women are the most loyal part of the Democratic Party. And I don't know if they will lockstep behind her. I've said I don't think the CBC is going to endorse her. I think if South Carolina goes first, you need to tread carefully. I think this is where the states that go first, the size of the Black population, because Sean, otherwise, I don't see what her base is. I don't see what her coalition is. I don't see, forget the general, just even in the primary. So for all the reasons we've discussed many times, she has a lot of flaws, but I have heard from people, she wakes up every single day thinking, how can I run again?
Yeah, no, I agree. But I just got to think to myself, I think you're absolutely right. If it's South Carolina first and you know that you can get a heavy Black population, turn out the sorority sisters, etc. Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
But I got to think going forward, how do you get over the question? The number one choice that you made was who do you think should succeed you? And this guy literally isn't just a knucklehead.
He's off the stage.
You chalk it up to a timing thing too, and how quickly she had to name something.
Guess what, though?
Not to excuse it, because I'm sure that's what her fans will do.
My point
well, but
here's the president is to make bold and decisive decisions at critical moments. And if the decision that you had to make that was the most important of all was choosing that knucklehead, then I question your judgment on everything.
Well, and the other problem with that is, by most accounts, the reason that she really fell in love with him was that he was like, put me in the game, coach. I'll do anything you want. Like he kissed her rear end. There was, whereas others pressed her on like, will I be involved? How are we going to govern? And she loved his kind of, get him, kind of puppy love a little bit, which, Sean, to your point, doesn't speak great about kind of judgment after all.
I just think, like, if you're in the Kamala Harris camp right now for 2028, like, nothing's going to change you because you're there out of pure loyalty. Like, it's shocking to me that there are a significant number of Democratic voters who are there. But, like, if you are there already, you're willing to excuse basically anything at this point. Okay, let's move to questions. I also want to clarify something. I saw in the comments that somebody said that I said at the top of the show that the woman who was killed was the mother of 6. I meant to say the mother of a 6-year-old. So just
the mother of 3, right?
I actually don't know how many children she has had, but I meant to say of a 6-year-old because that's what I definitely had read. Okay, so let's go to questions. We'll have a couple from X here to start. On a lighter note in news, the nutrition guidelines that, if fully followed, will both have doctors praising their patients and wanting to yell at them. Who wants to take that?
Well, by the way, I thought
and I questioned.
Look, I think that the thing that sort of fascinates me, having tried to again watch a bunch of the news this morning on the reaction to this, is the quote medical experts all had to say, they are kind of right. We should have decreased our ultra processed foods. We should have definitely some more protein. They quibbled on whether the red meat was right or not. They did admit that some of the dairy standards, the sort of low fat wasn't necessarily. But the thing that always blows my mind is, like, there seems to be universal agreement on the ultra processed foods, again, regardless of whether, I know there's some debate over the fatty foods and et cetera. But the thing that I find funny is if there's all this universal agreement, it was like red dye when they banned it and everyone said, yeah, it's a good idea. Why wasn't this done before?
Yeah.
Like why did it? It's like Maha got mocked. All of these people were told that they were nuts. And then they actually make the move, reverse the pyramid, do it. And everyone goes, yeah, it's probably the right thing to do. And I'll go, well, then why didn't you do it? Yeah. I will say this, the best headline coming out of this entire thing, hat tip New York Post, is Dr. Oz saying, when they asked about the alcohol piece, because that's one other
that's a great line.
He said, don't drink it for breakfast.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's the one
except
place,
on Army Navy game days, then you can. Right?
You could even hold till noon. The game's at 3. So I'd say I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I would say If you had to say you had to wait till noon, it's probably fair.
Noon Greenwich Standard Time, which would be
That's right. West
7 a.m. here. Look, I totally, I said this on X yesterday. I think this is great. And I think I'll tell you why they never did it. I won't name friends, but I know people who represent
big food.
Who work for restaurants and for, the sugar industry, and they're very well paid. They're excellent at what they do. They gummed it up. And to your point, Sean, one place I'll give RFK tremendous credit, and the Trump administration, is they do have no problem flipping the bird at some of these people and saying it's the right thing to do.
That's a real peek behind the curtain.
It's not just big pharma. It really is big food. I mean, when you look at what happened. I mean, you go back, I've gone down enough rabbit holes on this to go back and look at what happened when there was a big when tobacco was going down and people started making additional investments to diversify their holdings and where they bought and what they did. But it is amazing.
Yep.
And I had a cookie for breakfast. Ooh, shit. Okay, let's move to the next question on X. The existence of sanctuary cities, pros and cons. Let's start with Dan on that one, because I think you might be the only one who would say there might be some pros. I don't think Sean's going to be saying there's going to be any pros.
Look, I think as old as the Republic is, there has always been this, go back to the civil rights era when Democrats wanted to send the federal government into these southern states, and they said kind of, stay out. Our system of government gives kind of states and local governments, power that isn't explicitly in the Constitution. Now, in this instance, if you're here illegally, that is a federal issue, and ICE has a right to go in to remove you. Now, I understand the value of immigrants. My family, immigrated here, hundreds of years ago. But, the kind of pros and cons of our system inherently produce this tension. I mean, maybe that's a little too deep, but
I mean, like, the Democrats will argue that, like, Democrats will also argue like that the sanctuary cities, not Dan, but maybe some other Democrats, that like it enables, people who are in the shadows to come forward when they need healthcare, when they have a problem, to call law enforcement, not to be afraid to like come forward, etc. But like, you're right, Dan. It's like, if you're here illegally, like
you're here illegally,
and like it's kind of crazy to me that sanctuary cities even exist. Like,
totally.
Anyway,
well, it goes to the point that as a country, we became so accepting of all these illegal people in the country.
Yeah.
And again, I go back to Brexit. Like, look at what's happening in Europe. This is not just an American phenomenon to say the immigration system was out of control. Countries are not okay with this anymore. And there's just a lot of people that find that offensive. But at the ballot box, we've gone in a different direction. You got to respect it.
I would just say this. This is one issue where what I would say to Deborah is I'd love to hear somebody talk to me about the pros, right? We are a nation of laws. If the first act that you make is to break our law, coming in this whole notion of the pursuit of a greater good, I can do what I want. I can break whatever law. I don't have to follow whatever norm because I believe that I am in pursuit of a greater good, which is, what I think sometimes Bill Clinton used to say a lot, where he wouldn't do certain things. He said, but I believe then change the law. But you can't have it both ways. You cannot say, I want to come to America because I love it. I'm fleeing corruption in my country. America's a nation of law. And then say, but I'm going to break their laws to come in to get that benefit. It's just, I don't understand. To me, as Dan said, if you're not Native American, we're all the sons and daughters of immigrants. So it's not the greatest system. It definitely needs reform. There's no question about it. I think, but the idea that somehow there's a pro of saying if you break our laws, that's a good thing, I just don't see one.
Yeah. Let's take some questions from the chat. Question for Rachel. There you go. When two things are happening at the same time, how do you decide what to cover immediately? Good question. For example, Hegseth Rubio conference happening at the same time as the nutrition announcement. Well, for a lot of reporters, it comes down to your beat. Like, are you an admin and reporter? Like, do you cover health issues? Like, where is the focus will sort of be dictated from that. For me, I'll just be honest, like, when there's so much happening, and that's always the case in the Trump administration. I mean, I think about the first couple months, I had this sort of thing I used to tell people when they'd ask me what it was like to cover the beginning of Trump's second term. And I said it was like being on a farm and having all these chickens running around you, and the chickens are stories. And it's like, oh my gosh, which chicken do you chase? I don't know. Like you chase one chicken and then you're running after another. Anyways, so the way I would usually pick is like my only bias is in trying to break news and trying to tell people something they don't know. In journalism, they call that scoops. And so if I am given a scoop about a topic that has nothing to do with is the main focus of the day, I will easily drop the main focus of the day and go to the scoop. So that's sort of how I personally prioritize what I'm going to cover. Good
Isn't
question.
it too? I think it's a great answer. I think it depends on, like, to your point, if you're still at Politico, they'll say, Rachel, you cover the Hegseth Rubio thing, Susie or Bobby or whatever, you cover this, right? But when you're an independent journalist, I think it comes down to more of what you said, which is, and also maybe saying, I can watch that one later. I cover this one live. So I'll tweet, I'll live break this one, and then I'll go back and watch the conference.
Yeah, absolutely. And any place you can get greater access to. So like if I'm invited to one press conference, or I can get into one press conference versus the other one I'd have to cover, on camera, like I'm always going to prioritize the one where I'm getting the best and best access. So, okay, let's do another one. Okay, for Sean, from John Patrick Clancy, will Republicans counter the ACA with their own plan or continue sleight of hand tricks, hoping the news cycle moves too fast? News cycles move too fast for people to keep up. Deep red Mississippi, not happy.
Yeah. So John Patrick Clancy, that's a phenomenal name.
It is. Sounds like a superhero.
Well,
like
or John,
yeah.
Either you're a superhero or you're about to kill somebody. Because I feel like that's the kind of headline you wake up and be like, last night, John Patrick Clancy committed for. Like,
John, what an awful thing to say.
No, anyway. Or I said he could be a superhero. Just to be clear, John, you could be the superhero. I think it's a great question, and one that infuriates me. Like, we keep talking about this. And again, yesterday there was further discussion about this. There is a notion today not a notion, we talked about it earlier, there'll be a vote about to extend the subsidies for 3 years. What do we do? It just makes my blood boil. What are we doing? Stop talking about it. Offer a solution. And again, as a layperson, I might not have all the solutions, but it seems like we've talked about the confines and the contours of a plan, which is really try to shift this more to a market forces driven thing where you do a catastrophic plan tied onto a health savings account that can grow in perpetuity, that creates a system where you start to make health systems compete with each other. I believe something like that, but just continuing to kick the can down the road, which is what you're asking. I gotta believe that at some point there's a little bit of both that happen. They end up saying, we're going to take the subsidies, create a medical savings account, but it's not going to solve the problem, and it's not going to allow for any real reforms, because to do this, the system either has to start to tilt in one direction or another. And I think this is going to still tilt towards the insurance companies.
Let's do one more question, since we came to questions a little late, and then we will say adieu. Question: will anyone go to jail for the daycare fraud anywhere?
Great question. Yes, I think somebody will go, and it sounds like more than one person should, but we will see. But just an absolutely remarkable thing. And I'll make note that, JD Vance said last night, they're going to go look at other states, not just withholding money like they announced recently. Fraud is fraud. You should not support it, whether you're a D or an R, period.
And let's note that the administration has said that they want to deport some of these people. So maybe they don't go to jail. Maybe they deport some of them.
Let me go back to my sure and tried media. This is the headline in CBS. Minneapolis daycare targeted in Nick Shirley YouTube video is now closed, state records show. Yeah, I don't think it was targeted by Nick Shirley is the reason they're closing. I think they're closing because there's no kids and it's a massive amount of fraud. It's just, again, the cover-up of this crap by the media is unbelievable. Targeted by Nick Shirley, they didn't have children and they were taking billions of dollars in fraud and fraudulently using it. Like, that's not like, you can blame Nick Shirley for them closing, but maybe it's more like fraudulent childcare center closes because they can't spell learning. I don't know, but like, this is unreal how this stuff gets handled. Yes, somebody should go to jail. A lot of people should go to jail. And I think then, well, I'll leave the rest of the critique.
It also shows as you go forward, citizen journalists now have a much bigger microphone. And that is something, whether you're a D or an R, if you're running something, you know, used to be, Sean, when we were doing campaigns, it was trackers, right? People with a, you know, camera, and then it became phones following you around. Now, city, state governments are big, and people are going to start digging through. And you know what? It's good. It's holding them accountable. If something's wrong, I think the playbook is you should embrace, if they find something, don't knee jerk and say, well, that person is a, you know, right wing or a left wing lunatic. In this instance, like, and Walz is still attacking the guy.
Yeah.
Like, when the facts clearly play out on his side.
But, you know, Dan, I want to say that to your point, though, what's so profound is that, like, so many things that when, you know, before I know somebody who used to be a dumpster diver. It wasn't even just the trackers. Before then, you used to go find information in different ways. Now you can get a video. But there is an entirely new dynamic about whether it's campaigns or journalism that you can now just say, I'll do it. Nick Shirley decided to make a career out of this. And look at what's happened to him. He's blown up. Everyone, I mean, he became internationally known, frankly, for this investigation. I think that that's the point that I would make to so many younger people is that, like, we're doing this. You know, when I got out of the White House, the idea of, like, I even had a podcast we set up through a media company. I had to go into a radio station to record it. And now we can do a program that gets, you know, national, worldwide attention sitting in our kitchens. I think the world has changed for journalism, for campaigns in so many positive ways that allow people who otherwise have been shut out of a system to get in now.
Yeah. Or people who would just have to wait. I mean, if you think about, like, you know, whether you're trying to go through the television industry or trying to cover a certain issue, a lot of times, like, and I used to tell this to students, like, you have to do a job nobody wants for a while, and eventually you'll perhaps get the job you want in journalism. It's just not that way anymore. It's like, it's pretty incredible. Anyway,
or frankly, you could say, I'm not even going to go into that industry. I'm going to do what Nick Shirley did and make my own.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. You know, you can just do it, right? I mean, and this is a good example of this. Like, I wanted to have a political podcast show for a long time. Worked on it for about 1.5 years, and ultimately said, this isn't working. I'm pulling the plug. I'm leaving Politico, and here we are. Yay! Okay, guys, that's all we have time for. Thanks for joining, everyone who's still on. We're about 8 minutes over. We will be back again at 8:30.
Yeah. Over what?
I don't know. Like, I don't know. Maybe have people having meetings. Sean, what do you have coming up today?
It's Thursday. It's the panel. We're going to break down a lot of Minnesota fraud. We'll talk about this ICE shooting, break down the video with the entire panel. Audrey Folberg from National Review, my buddy up in New England, Grace Curley, the radio host in Boston, and David Avella, the chairman of GoPack. And by the way, again, go to our handles at DC Huddle to sign up tomorrow. I know we mentioned it. Friday's not the first day. We're gonna do this probably in a few weeks or so. We'll figure out the timetable, but that's why go to the DC Huddle, sign up for our newsletter, sign up for that premium service if you want to chat with us on Fridays. But we wanted to announce it today, so it's not going to start tomorrow.
We will have audience participation tomorrow.
Yep, tomorrow
on camera.
Yep. On camera. Get ready.
Smile.
So if you go to thedchuddle.com, you can get the link to join us tomorrow live. Have your question answered on air as well as the YouTube chat and the Twitter. But Rachel, when's the next newsletter coming out?
I don't know, Sean.
All right. Well,
wow.
Listen,
right.
I might decide. I will probably make some calls right after the show. And then if I get something good, it'll happen 3 hours later.
Probably that's why you got to go to rachelbade.com now and sign up so that you're always in the know.
Yeah, please sign up, guys. I appreciate it. It's free. And go to thedchuddle.com. Make sure you're signing up for our YouTube. Our YouTube is growing right now, so that's great. And if you haven't signed up, just go right now and do it before you forget. Do it right now. We'll see you guys tomorrow, 8:30.
See you
Friday.